how it all started is before I was a geek, I was actually a tank officer. And one of the interesting things is and I'm sure some of you that have served in the military, is in the military, one of the things you need to know is your enemy. Who are you going to be having to go out there and fight the bad guys? So as a tank officer, I had to know and understand how Soviet tanks worked, got to crawl around in them, what a tank platoon looked like, what a tank company, things like that. Really know your enemy. So this is around 95, 96. Well, once I got out of the military and went to graduate school, I also started as an intern at a local Sun Microsystems consulting company. So I was working a lot with Sun Microsystems operating systems and stuff like that. And one day, about 96, 97, the company decided they needed somebody that was an expert in firewalls because they started getting people asking about firewalls and customers. And nobody wanted it. So I was the intern at this little company, and they're like, you, intern, you're now going to learn about firewalls. What's a firewall? Remember, this is like 96, 97. So I went off to learn about firewalls and became the so-called security expert at the company, simply because I knew what a firewall was. That's all it took in 96 to be a security expert. You could spell firewall. And so I'm going around the world installing these firewalls. This is when I was working for Sun Microsystems. So I was going all over the world, and I started to realize I am supposed to defend these companies against bad guys, cyber bad guys. But I don't know who my enemy is. You know, in the military, you're supposed to know your enemy. But cyber world, I have no idea who these people are, why they're attacking, or how. So I decided I need to learn. Go to the internet and start searching. Who are these cyber bad guys? But there's no information on the internet about them. Then I learned about something called honeypots. Computers designed to be hacked. How cool. Now, back in 97, 98, there's some honeypots out there. The Deception Toolkit, let's see, Clifford Stoll, you know, The Cuckoo's Egg, great read if you've never read it, and a couple others, Bill Cheswick. And all these honeypots are similar in that they're code running on a computer designed to look like another computer. Well, this is great, how cool. Except I don't know how to code. I'm a network weenie. I'm good at looking at packets and building firewalls, but I don't know how to code. So around late 98, I start coming up with an idea. Why don't I just take a computer, put it out on the internet, and let anybody hack it and see what they do? A real computer. Now, I'm a bad coder, but I'm pretty good with firewalls. So I'll just put a firewall in front of a computer and let anybody come in, but I won't let it go out, so no harm can come into it. So what happens in February of 1999 is I set up my first Honeynet. And I have no idea if this is going to work. Nobody has ever done something like this. So I just put a Linux 5 computer out on the internet with a firewall in front of it. Anything inbound, nothing outbound. I don't know how long it's going to take. Days, weeks, months, years, anything like that. Now this picture, this is the honeypot that was actually set up, but this picture is actually the wrong picture because it's actually on my wife's dining room table. So I asked my wife last night, hey honey, can you send me the picture of the computer? I got the wrong picture. But this gives you an idea of what it looked like. This is important for a very big reason. So I set the Honeynet up, and this was back in the days when you have ISDN. And have the ISDN router right next to the computer. I set it up, and within an hour, something amazing happens. I start seeing the lights flashing on the ISDN router. Oh my gosh, something has happened. I can't believe it. And I tell my wife, honey, there's a hacker in my computer. Because, you know, there's all sorts of this network traffic going on. My wife looks at me and she goes, what? So, yeah, there's a hacker on my honeypot. Can you believe it? My wife looks at me and goes, you mean there's a hacker on my dining room table? And I'm like, yeah, this is great. We're going to learn all. She's like, no, pull the plug. Like, no, I can't pull the plug. I've got a hacker. This is so awesome. She's like, you pull the plug. And I said, I am the security expert. I know what I'm doing. I'm not pulling the plug. Now as we're going back and forth and I'm explaining to how I know all this stuff, the lights stop. Something's happened. The hacker is gone. So I jump on the computer to figure out what's going on. And what had happened is when the bad guy got into the system, he couldn't go back out. Remember the firewall? And he figured something was wrong. And he wiped the entire hard drive. I lost everything, all of his keystrokes, all of his tools, everything. And I sat there and I go, oh, he figured it out. He just blew away everything. And my wife just sat there and said, I told you, you should have pulled the plug. And she was right. So the very first Honeynet that was ever developed in February 1997 was a total failure. But it showed that the concept worked. The bad guys were out there scanning, and you could learn a lot. So what ended up happening is I realized this stuff is really cool, it has potential, and I have no clue what I'm doing. I need help. So over time, I started playing with it, but then I sent out an email. And this is in October of 1999, and I sent out an email to 5 people. And the email basically said, hey, I'm going to set up this big Honeynet of all these different computers. They're like, what's a Honeynet? And what's really interesting is the Honeynet, I thought bad guys really wouldn't still be actively hacking it. So the whole idea is, hey guys, you can come in and hack it whenever you want. I'll analyze what's going on. But if we get hacked by any real hackers, I'll need your help. And what's interesting, of those 5 people that I emailed, one of them was Ed Scotus, probably one of the best pen testers in the world. And the other one, Marty Resch. What you may not realize is some of the original features put in Snort were done in 1999 and 2000 because back then, nobody knew Snort, so Marty was open to any type of features. So one of the very first features he added in Snort for us was the ability to extract text messages from binary captures. So when the bad guys are going in and fire up IRC chats, we can extract sessions using Snort. Nowadays, it's a little harder to put in special requests for Marty for special features. So what's really neat, and for some of you guys, even within the Honeynet project, that's why the original mail list was called the War Games mail list. Because when we first set up this Honeynet, it was war games. Hey guys, hack it whenever you want kind of thing. But over time, it grew. And in 2000, something very special happened. I consider it special. In 2000, we had a Solaris honeypot. Remember, my background was Sun Microsystems, so I had stacks of Solaris boxes in my house. And we had a Solaris 2.6 honeypot hacked. And what was special about this one is the bad guys used the honeypot as their command and control system for communicating with each other. And this is eventually what became known as the Know Your Enemy Motives paper. And it ended up being a group out of Pakistan called GeForce, who were proclaiming for hacktivism that they were trying to defend the conflict between Pakistan and India about Kashmir, over some land in northern India. And what we quickly found is that's what they were saying, but because they were using our honeypot for communications, we quickly saw that they were actually dealing in stolen credit cards to set up an ISP in Karachi. So, but what was really interesting is we gathered all this information, and we had about 20 or 30 guys get together and try to figure all of this out. Now remember, this is back in 2000, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So we released all their conversations, all their tools, and things like that, and that was a really big deal. And when we released the paper, we had about 20, 30 people working on it, and some of them are in this room right now. We're like, should we call ourselves something? So we ended up just on the fly, Honeynet Project. Yeah, sure, that sounds good. So that's what we called ourselves when we released the paper. And so that's why we say we kind of officially started in 2000, even though we quasi-started in 1999. It was kind of there was no master plan. It was just a bunch of people banding together and trying to help each other and learn. And over time, it just grew and formalized. So what I'm going to do here is this, I was thinking, I'll do this detailed history of the Honeynet project, starting from beginning to end. And I quickly realized, A, That's really boring. I don't want to bore people. 2, there are so many stories and so many things that happened in the past 15 years since that date that we couldn't possibly cover it in half an hour. So what I'm going to do is just share with you some of the key stories to give you an idea of what we're all about, how we help the community, and how you can help yourselves and benefit from it. So just going to share some stories about how things happened and why. So in this process, one of the things we thought would be cool is to develop a point-of-sales honeypot. This is around 2001, 2002. If you're not familiar, point of sales, POS, that's where your credit card gets swiped through for buying things at a retail store, restaurant, things like that. Remember, this is also back in the day before chip and pin. Of course, in the States, we still don't have chip and pin. We're a little bit behind, so, cut us some slack. But we thought it'd be cool. Let's deploy a point-of-sales computer. Let the bad guys hack it and see what they're doing with it, who's hacking it, and things like that. So we go out and we're going to buy a point-of-sale system. They're expensive. It's like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. So we decide, let's go buy one on eBay. We're just a couple of geeks. So we go to eBay and buy a used point-of-sale system, and they send it to us. And we send it to a guy on the team named Dave Barnett. Dave Barnett, back at this time, was probably one of the few people in the world certified by Visa to do forensics on hacked point-of-sale system. Perfect guy to have. So we send the point-of-sales to him. Dave's going to take an image before it's hacked. Then we'll take an image after it's hacked and compare the two. I get a call from Dave. Lance, I've got the point-of-sale system. This did a complete analysis of it. We've got a problem. We can't use it. Oh, come on. The licensing, the hardware, it should all work. What's the problem? Oh, it works all right. We are now the proud owner of 356,000 credit cards. I'm like, what? They never wiped the credit cards from the point-of-sale system. So we decide we better do the right thing. So we're in Chicago. We call the local Secret Service in Chicago. And we explain what we're doing and that we found credit cards, but we're going to do the right thing. We're going to wipe them because we just want to do the right thing. So the Secret Service's reaction was this. You're doing what? Point-of-sales credit card honeypots? That's cool. Come show us. So we spent a year with the Secret Service helping them deploy point-of-sales honeypots. But Dave Barnett calls another group, calls Visa. Visa, hey, this is the Honeynet Project, explains it a little bit. We just wanted to let you know, we bought a used point-of-sale system on eBay, and we found credit cards on it. Now, we're doing the right thing. We're going to go ahead and wipe the credit cards and all that good stuff, but we just wanted to let you know that we found this. And he said he was shocked by Visa's response, because Visa's response was this. You mean people are selling used point-of-sale systems on eBay? They had no idea that this was going on. But the reason I'm sharing this story is we don't realize it, but our actions have huge impacts. 2 years ago, I was teaching a class for SANS in San Diego, and I just gone through this exact same story. And a person in the far back raised their hand and said, Lance, when you guys called Visa, I was one of the people on the conference call. Whoa, how cool, small world. So I asked him, did we have any impact? Did we make any difference? I'm just curious. Did you guys even care? Because, when we called Visa, they said, thank you, and just hung up. He said, you guys ever hear of this thing called PCI DSS? Yeah. You're one of the reasons why. So what happened is after we had that conversation with Visa, he said the entire executive board scrambled, had meetings for days, and that really kicked off this whole process. So one of the really neat things is, I quickly learned is, in this research and all the things people do here, it's hard to realize just how the impact of everybody's actions and the difference we all make on a global scale, because you only see it in your little small world, but as you see the ripple effect, it's really, really exciting. Of course, there's a couple other, there's always, for every story like that, there's a story where you go, oh. So here's the "do" story. Here's the "don't do what Lance did" story. There's a lot of those, by the way. For those of you that, I know Anton and a couple others are going to remember this. One of the first Honeynet projects we had outside the United States, one of the annual workshops, was in Mexico City. And it's about a week or two before we're all going to meet in Mexico City. So it's like this, but in Mexico City a couple of years ago. And I emailed the hotel in Mexico City. Hey, folks, can you send me a list of all the Honeynet project members that have already registered for the event? They've already got their room. Because what I was going to do is let me get a list of everybody that's registered for the event. And for the people that are missing, I'm going to go ahead and send them a hate mail and say, hey, you need to go register. So they send me an Excel spreadsheet, a list of everyone from the Honeynet project that registered from the event. All of the world's security experts. I took the Excel spreadsheet and I just forwarded it to the team mail list. And there's about 100 security experts on it. And then about 15 minutes later, I get a phone call. I'm not sure if it was from Anton or from someone. Forget who it was. And they go, Lance, did you open that spreadsheet before you just sent it to the whole mail list? I'm like, no. Take a look. Okay, so I go ahead and I open the spreadsheet. And sure enough, it was great. They had a list of everyone within the Honeynet project that was registered for the event. Had their first name, their last name, their phone number, their credit card, the expiration date, the CVV2 number, I mean, all sorts of stuff. And I just forwarded everybody's private information to, 100 of the world's leading security experts. Anton, I think this is when you were at Qualys, you were the PCI DSS expert. So that was a bit of a oops. So don't do what Lance did. Open, look at an attachment before you forward it to everyone. But so the whole idea here is I just want to, remind folks that we're working hard and sometimes we don't realize the impact we're having, and that impact is on a global scale. So we started having, this is back in the early days, we started having these annual get-togethers. But these annual get-togethers weren't quite as formal at first. They were actually barbecue cookouts in my house. It was like we'd all met each other over the internet, we had worked together, so we'd wanted to actually meet each other and share and code. So it was a chance to where we can meet together. So Jeff Nathan's in here. Jeff, where are you? There's Jeff way back there. Dragos, this dodgy Romanian guy, will be coming later. If you want a lot of really cool stories about what happens on the dark side, ask that guy. Jed Hale, he's one of the original developers of Snort Inline. But it was also a chance where we could just share stories and learn. So there's Anton and Jeff Stutzman. But coding, Doug Song and Niels Provost. That's one of the key things too, is we'd get together and socialize, but we'd code like hell and create all sorts of new stuff. And then of course we just drink. And in fact, some of the original workshops got a little bit out of hand. So this was the first one. We actually had some official rules. This is for the first couple years when they were at my house. So I actually found the rules. We have an official list of rules. And two of the official rules after the first barbecue were I had a 2-year-old. So no giving, this is an official rule. The other one, like I said, my wife. But my wife's from Poland. I don't know about other European countries, but don't mess with Polish wives. All right? This was the other rule. That's an official rule because of K2. All right, Shane McCauley, yeah, he made a big mess in the bathroom, so the official rule, if you were going to be barfing, you had to go in the backyard. I don't know how many people passed out in the bathroom. We actually then went from official, just barbecues to actually, hey, we're actually organized. Let's go to a hotel room, and we, something like this. And then we actually started having our first international events in Costa Rica. So we're going around all over the world. Now we're in Norway. So that it's officially, it keeps growing. It's really neat is, you know, the organization has had a lot of impacts and people have done a lot of good things. So for example, there's been 25 white papers, at least I started counting. And each white paper has its own story and own unique impact. And I'll just touch a couple of them because a lot of the people are here. So Conficker. Conficker came out in 2008. As you may remember, it's like one of the last really big worms. It did a lot of damage. You may not realize, two guys on the Honeynet Project wrote a paper on it. And a couple of the world's Conficker experts are in this room right now. Dave, where's Dave Watson? There's Dave Watson and Felix, where are you? Okay, they're both right back there. If you want to know anything about Conficker, Dave was on the Conficker working group. Felix helped develop this paper. Some amazing stuff. But one of the things you'll quickly realize is behind each paper, behind each project, there's a fascinating story. So for example, Conficker. In this white paper, Felix and his partner in crime, Tillman, two Germans. Germans love honeypots, by the way. You know, half these stories lead back to Germany. They had discovered, they wrote an intense white paper on how to reverse engineer it, how to disable it, how to find it, how to remove. It's an amazing, amazing technical white paper. But there's a story about what was not published. Those are always the fun stories. So what you don't know is Tillman and Felix had also discovered a way to hack into Conficker. When Conficker had hacked into literally millions of computers around the world, the bad guys had vulnerabilities in their code. So when Conficker infected a computer, that computer was now vulnerable to something else. So Tillman and Felix developed code to exploit it and wanted to publish it, but also wanted to save the world and release a worm to hack every infected computer and uninfect it. Correct me if I'm wrong, that was the plan? Yes, all right. And he wanted to do it under the name of the Honeynet Project. So I was like, don't know about that one. Not sure if we want to go out and hack millions of computers. And I'll never forget, I spent one weekend, an entire weekend, with Tillman and Felix on one phone. Let's release it. Let's save the world. And the head of the FBI and the other one going, don't, please don't take out the entire world. So I eventually convinced them not to go ahead and try to hack these millions of computers around the world because it would be pretty bad. And I'd like to think in the end it worked out pretty good. Yeah, we still like the Germans, come on, you just want to hack them. So, and then fast flux, reverse proxies, William, where are you? All right, there's William Saluski. Show your hand. This guy for about 10 years worked at AOL. That's the world's biggest honeypot. Millions of AOL users, all hacked. He's seen every type of evilness in the world. All right, he's the one that published fast flux, reverse proxies. Honest to God, how many of you have seen Matrix? How many of you have seen the movie Matrix? Yeah, but if you're not raising your hand, you're in the wrong room. All right, come on, that's about what I expected. Have you ever seen, there's a part in the Matrix where they're in the spaceship, they're talking, and you see all this green code coming down the screen. And one of the guys says, yeah, I don't see the code. I just see blonde, brunette, things like that. That's kind of cool. That guy's hardcore. Literally, I've seen William do that at AOL. When he was at AOL, he had 5 computer screens up. And I remember being in there one day, he was explaining how he discovered fax flux and these Russians and all. The Russians are always doing bad stuff. I'm not sure what's up there. But what's going on is there's all this code coming down the screen, and it's in hex. And I never forget that he's coding on something, and he looked at hex and goes, oh, there goes those damn Romanians again. Yep, there's the exploit code. Yep, there's... And he's reading hex as it's scrolling down the screen. He literally did that. So, you know, there's a hardcore geek if you want to know what's going on. So Max Kilger and Jeff Stutzman identified a way to predict days out when somebody was going to hack your computer. Virtual honeypots, Thorsten Holtz, and I think that was Neil Provost. Client honeypots, Christian. This is a whole concept right here. This is a technology that Google and Bing and others are using actively, where they go out to websites and see if they're infected and stuff like that. So once again, it shows this amazing ripple effect where somebody has does one thing, and it expands literally all over the internet. They actually also, we released a couple of books right here, 2001, and as you can see here, 2004, just everything we were doing. But what I thought was really, really neat too is we did one of the first forensic challenges, and it's wonderful. People come up to me nowadays and say, Lance, when you guys did that challenge, it got me interested in forensics. So 2001, we took a hacked honeypot, posted it to the internet, and said, there's a challenge. Who can analyze it? And we had 13 people submit. It's, to this day, probably one of the most analyzed hard drives in the world. But once again, there's an interesting story behind that. Another one of those, don't do what Lance did. Because there's actually, that wasn't the first honeypot, there was one before it. So what happened is I had a Linux honeypot, but in its previous life, it was a Solaris x86 firewall, and a previous life before that, it was a Windows like 95, 98 computer. So the Linux honeypot gets hacked. Now, it's got other operating systems from it previously, but it gets hacked, and this is what I'm going to use for the forensics challenge. But I have the image checked out by a couple experts beforehand. So back in in 2001, the top forensics experts in the world are Dan Farmer and Vitsa Venema. So I send them a copy of the image and say, guys, can you check this out? We're doing a forensics challenge. And I thought they'd come back and say, cool, this is great, go for it. I get an email from Dan Farmer. Lance, you idiot. I'm like, okay. And I start analyzing it, and he's dead on. What had happened is the forensics image, even though I installed Linux on top of it, my Solaris x86 files could be recovered beforehand, and then the Windows 95, 98 files before that could be recovered. So I quickly learned from these guys that deleting data is far harder than you think, and if I had released that image, all of my personal data would have been found when people were doing the forensics challenge. So I had to redo it, wipe the hard drive clean, null it out, then install Linux. Then that became the forensics challenge of 2001. So once again, you can see what's interesting is when we're doing a lot of research, it's littered with failure after failure after failure. I mean, look at our point of sales honeypot. It was a total failure. But even in failure, you can contribute a lot to the community. So we did something similar where we had code, not a honeypot, but code, and reverse engineer it. And this was led by a Dutch guy called Joop de Haas. And Joop did a really interesting analysis where he discovered that the algorithm for the encryption of the malware was so badly done, it took him days to figure out how to reverse it. It was so poorly done. So we thought that was interesting. But once again, here's another where you just take real data from the bad guys and you learn from it, because that's what we're all about. We don't want to study theory. Let's go out and see what they're really, really doing. And so what we started doing over time, too, is we had a group of 20, 30 people, but how do we get them involved? So we started developing a chapter model where we could get chapters from all over the world involved. And these were the first couple of chapters. And what's interesting is, this is back in 2001, 2002, is if you come forward to today, only 2 of these chapters really still exist today. And surprisingly enough, the Brazilian guys. So where's the Brazilian folks? Brazilian, because they're based out of the Brazilian. Come on, guys, raise your hand. All right, there you go. They're being a little, if it was Americans, it'd be like, oh yeah, that's us over here. Americans are so shy. But the other one is the Norwegian Honeynet Project. So where's Einar? There we go. He was one of the very first. So he's been around for a while. So you Norwegians are way ahead of the power curve. And also, lots and lots of tools out there, too. You just go down the list. So what's interesting about CBEC 2, it was helped develop by a guy named Mike Davis. And that code was the original idea for his multi-million-dollar company now called, called Counterattack. So what's really interesting is seeing all the stuff people have done and where they've taken it to nowadays. Also, lots of interesting stories. And I just want to highlight 2 of them. And the whole reason I just want to highlight 2 of these stories is once again showing you the impact that we can all have. So, for example, the first Department of Defense Honeynet was developed by two guys named Rob McMillan and Glenn Charlin. And an interesting story. They didn't do this in a DoD network. They did it on just a little public commercial network. But this is when they were working at DoD. They had read about this Honeynet thing, and they contacted me. And I explained how it works. And they're like, this is cool. Now remember, this is back again in 99, 2000. This whole cybersecurity thing's not that big of a deal. So they decided to set up the Honeynet. And they set it up on a Friday. And it's Friday afternoon, and they're just finishing up, and they've got to leave and go home for the weekend. But they've got it only half set up. They got the honeypot part set up where the bad guys could hack it, but they haven't set up the firewall yet to control if the honeypot gets hacked to stop the guys from going outbound. But they're like, nobody's going to hack it. You can see where this is going. So what ends up happening, they come back Monday morning, discovered that a bad guy had hacked the honeypot and was now scanning and hacking the entire internet. And they're the DoD. So once again, they discovered it worked, but it ended up in failure. But interestingly enough, that became their PhD, that then led into a lot of work at the DoD. So once again, failure ultimately leads to success. But the other thing I really want to share with you is one of the key things I've learned in the past 15 years is the more you help the community, the more you help yourself. The more the community helps yourself. Because you think, oh man, all this volunteer effort, why am I doing this? Because you generate good karma. And I'm a big believer of that because it really does come back to help you. One of my, another favorite story of mine, Ryan McGeehan. A lot of the older timers know Ryan. So 2003, 2004, I think around there, Ryan was one of the leaders in doing a lot of web honeypots. Putting code on websites, tracking the bad guys to them, see what the bad guys are doing. And because he was interested in web honeypots, he knew web code very well. And at that time, he knew and was started playing around with a website that nobody had really heard of back then called Facebook. And he started finding all sorts of vulnerabilities in Facebook. And he would submit it to them out of his own goodwill and then helping them out. And so the Facebook guys get it, and okay, boom. And over time, they started to trust Ryan because he's helping them out. And then one day, he finds a big vulnerability, and he sends the Facebook guys the code to fix the site. And they get the code, and he's chatting with them, and they can't get it to work. And he explains, well, you need to do this, and they can't get it to work. No, you need to do that, and they can't get it to work. And then finally, the guys at Facebook are like, oh, fuck it. Here, take root. Just go ahead and fix it for us. So he's got root on Facebook and then goes ahead and implements the fix for himself. And then he goes back and he goes, okay, it's all done, it's fixed. And the guys at Facebook are like, cool, we appreciate it. You want a job? Ryan became the very, very first guy at Facebook that was security. He's the first security guy that was ever hired at Facebook. Take a good guess at what his stock options are now today. All right? So, helping the community is all about helping yourself also. All right? It's just, I don't know how the good karma is going to help you, but trust me, it's going to help you. And every guy in here that's been in the Honeynet Project for a while can tell you the same story. It's how they found jobs, it's how they found people, it's how they found networking. Einar's got a bad reputation for hiring half the Honeynet Project. So, you got to be, it's good stuff. So it's just some of the things I wanted to share. And then there's all sorts of famous stories also. We're kind of running out of time, so I'll just share one quick one. Here's a very interesting one. We had to go, we travel all over the world presenting, and there was a funny story where we were going to present at the NSA, which is pretty interesting because it's a motley crew of all these internationals, Pakistan, Mexico, Brazil, and we just all go to present. And as we're going in to present into the NSA, they have this special room. Obviously, you got to go through security and the guards and stuff like that. And so one of the famous stories is Dragos, who will be coming soon, who's a Romanian, lives in Canada, and he's pretty dodgy looking. So he comes to the NSA, black leather, black shirt, black pant. I mean, he total hacker look. And we're all like, yeah, let's watch him go through NSA security. This is going to be fun. So Dragos is going through NSA security. They take his passport, look at him, and go, yeah, yeah, go ahead, you're cool. I'm like, oh, man. So Richard Salgado comes up. He's the head of the cybersecurity team at Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice, top secret cleared, professional suit, tie, lawyer, and he's the head of the cybersecurity team. And he walks up to the NSA security, and they look at him and go, stop, come here, we got to pull your records. And they pick him off, and they start interrogating him, and it took him 3 hours before they let him into the NSA. So I don't know how, what the algorithm is there, but it was a rather interesting algorithm. And all sorts of interesting stories. One of my favorite from Anton at the FBI Academy. We're in line to go through the FBI Academy there, and we're all getting interrogated as because this was right after 9/11. And what was it, Anton, one of the guards stopped you and then started interrogating you in Russian? Yeah, Marine Guard. And, yeah, Anton was freaked out because the Russian was perfect. I mean, it just all sorts. So when you're going out and you're helping the community, one of the neat things is you're going to meet all sorts of interesting people and get to travel all sorts. And we have all sorts of stories about doing this all over the world. All right, so I just wanted to wrap up. It was a little bit about the history of the Honeynet Project, but I just wanted to share some of the key fundamental things I've learned working with the community and working all over the world. Besides it being a blast and very fulfilling, key lessons I've learned is, really, the more you give back to the community, the more the community gives back to you. There's so many opportunities, there's so many neat people you're going to develop, so please keep doing it. And then if you're going to be working with volunteers, there's two key things I've really learned. First of all, nobody's in it for the money, all right? We're in it because we want to make a difference. So if you're working with volunteers, do everything you can to enable them to make that difference. The other key thing is this, and this is not only true for volunteers, but I've really learned this when just managing people. Think about it. For 10 years or so, I had to manage a whole group of really professional people with almost no budget. And the key thing I learned about people is this. We really overestimate money as a motivator. We focus too much on money. No. If you really want to motivate people, give them the recognition that they deserve. Make sure they get recognition, and make sure they know they're making a difference. And that's not only true for volunteers, but anywhere you work. If you're managing anyone, it's not money. At a certain point, money doesn't make a difference. What does is that recognition and letting they know they made the difference, and you appreciate their time and effort. And that's going to really take people a real long way. All right, that's all I've got. There's a lot of people here with a lot of history. Buy them a beer. I know that's expensive here. But I always wondered when Einar came to the United States why he would always drink like hell. And now I've discovered why. But anyways, buy him a beer. It'll be well worth it. And you've got a lot of great speakers who have a lot of amazing stories after this. So please learn from them also. Tusen tack.
Thank you, Lance.